Matt back in the studio with Qtastic. What is going on, bro? How you doing?
Man, we out here just doing our thing. Me and Mr. Kyle, the guitar MPC Lord.
Pearl Bots. Pearl like the gemstone. B-O-T-T-S.
Awesome. You doing a session tonight?
Yep, doing a session.
I'll do a little playback real quick. You ain't heard it, so I kind of messed it up.
All I wanna do is come, and
You are now listening to Qtastic.
if I haven't known that I thought it, cause I saw it all in my head. I got everything that I wanted. I stay stacking up on my bread. Everything.
But yeah, we in here, man.
Cool. Well, I got a couple questions for you.
Let's see what we got, man.
You're a professional sound engineer.
100%.
What in general is compression, and like how could you explain it in terms for a guy like me to understand it?
Compression is a very, technical thing, but it can be easy to overdo it and not know how to do it. Compression is really just taking levels that are either too loud and bringing them down, and taking the lower things that aren't really as crispy as some of the sounds and bringing those up. Now, how much threshold, ratio, peak reduction, whatever is on your thing, that's what lets how much of that signal actually go through the compressor. So if you just want a little bit of compression, don't turn your threshold or your peak reduction like always crazy, because it's going to have the window all the way open to where the signal can go through and get the compression. That's where a lot of people get it kind of messed up. They turn the gain up, they turn the input gain up, and it just doesn't really compress. So in the attack and release, your attack is how fast the compressor comes on and starts compressing. Your release is how long it holds on. So when you talk, your release is going to go and then it's going to keep going. If it's short, it's going to just stop the compression at the end of the release. The attack, if you want it to come in halfway before they start talking, when it gets kind of loud for them, that's how you do it.
So we were talking earlier, and you said you should generally really try to go for a good mix.
A lot of people will put a compressor on every single thing, thinking that's gonna make it sound like a certain sound. No, you should be picking the right sounds as a producer or engineer to put the right plugins on that situation. Everything's a frequency range. So if you have your low end frequencies, make sure all your low ends are matching. Make sure your mid range are matching. Your vocals are matching with the high end. EQ is what is really balancing the frequencies, not the compressor. If you're taking a lot away from the high on the compression, or on the EQ, and you gotta be like, yo, I gotta bring it back. If it's not loud enough, then you compress it. But I don't tend to use a lot of compression on sounds because I'm already picking the cool sounds that go with the song sonically. Now the person who's singing vocals, I'm gonna do a hard compressor on their vocals because I want to hear every little syllable and crispiness that comes out of the voice.
I picked up my mix wizard.
Nice.
And so I got my synths hooked up, and I got my MPCs hooked up, and I'm just trying to emulate kind of what you're doing here on a smaller level.
Sweet.
What is the benefit of using the 8 outs on the MPC and going through a mixer like that into analog, and what are the real benefits behind this, and what are we getting by doing that?
This can connect to the computer, and it can be by itself. We use it by itself. With the 8 outs, really you're getting 10 outputs because you still have your master left and right. So when you have them all going out and you want them to go out into the channel, so that way you can record. So you have 10 tracks, right? And if you only have 5 tracks if you're doing stereo tracks, which I do stereo only. On claps, kicks, snares, everything's stereo. They go in, right, and they're gonna go out of the MPC. So if I'm tracking inside of Pro Tools, kick, my snare, my clap, those are all gonna be going out at one time into Pro Tools, and I can record that in there that way by itself, right? So, but I have it going out into the Mix Wizard, same thing, 16 channels, and it goes out of that, it goes to my patch bay, and then it goes from the patch bay into Pro Tools. And why I do that is because I'm getting a certain signal path that's super analog through digital computer. So I want to go out of this into my analog converters and make it have that fat, We'll put an 808 one. it's just bumping. It's hard, so it's not really just being in the computer or being in the drum machine. It's actually going out of this into that mixer, into that patch bay, and out of that patch bay into Pro Tools.
See if I can get a scope
Yeah.
on this patch bay.
And then I can just individually pick my sounds and do what I want into Pro Tools. Or vice versa, if I want to go out, I would just go to the inputs right here. Right? I can patch them right into this and go from Pro Tools into my MPC and sample computer stuff or whatever I want to do. Analog outs, analog ins. You got like this sonic sound that you can't get out the computer. A lot of people got Apollos. I have Apollo. I have two of them. But a lot of people run internal. If you ever look on your console window, it'll say internal. Mine says word clock because I'm running word clock. You gotta learn about clocks, SMPTE, word clock, internal clock. Everything works off of your computer when it's on internal. So then you're not getting real analog. You're getting the computer sound chip. So if you got an Apple M1 chip, or you're running off of that. That's my answer to that.
Good answer. Final question.
Final.
Mastering.
Well, the controversial.
Is it necessary, especially for YouTube videos or singles?
Mastering is a very tricky word, and I'm gonna tell you this little real quick story. When I went to recording school, they asked me this question. They said, can you master one song? And at that time I'd already had a studio, a record label. I'd already been putting out records. People were paying me to mix and master their records for a lot of money. So I raised my hand like so heavy in the air, like, can you do it? And I said, yeah, you can master one song. And this OG laughed at me, this teacher. He laughed at me. He was like, nah, you can't master one song. One song mastering is because the mix wasn't there. The person didn't mix the song good enough in the volumes and the frequency ranges and the compression to make it actually hit hard. Now, if I have two songs and I'm trying to mix and master two songs, that's a mix and master, because if I have, like, I'm mastering your album with two songs on it, right? You weak ass album, just kidding. But I got two records and I'll put it in Pro Tools and I listen to both of those back to each other from one song to the other song, and the sonic difference between those two songs aren't blending very well, then I have to master that, because I have to play this for the audience to play back at a certain level, a certain frequency range that goes, if I go from one song to fourth song and they sound weird, they don't sound similar, then that mastering wasn't done correctly. And originally, back in the day, there was only EQs and compressors, baby. Like, there was no freaking supersonic maximizers and all these new wave plugins and all this crazy shit that it was already an analog gear processing center, and that's what you ran your shit through. Now, how to work those technologies back then made it to where it sounded great. Now, a lot of shit was mastered back then because they all had albums. There wasn't really too many singles per se, but if the single was good, and they did have singles on records, that shit was already bumping because they were running it through the same gear that they would in any other situation, because they only had gear, they didn't have computers. So if you had a really nice studio back then, you had to be in a nice studio. There wasn't a bunch of studios. So now you get to go through this one guy who's got all the shit and knows how to engineer a song, and that's what, oh, this is hot, it sounds good. Now if you listen back to certain shit back in the day, the levels are all over the place, because not everybody was doing it the right way, or they had their idea how to do it. But now we're at the super standard where everything is pumped up crazy loud and over crazy crowded. We don't have that old school technology in place, you know what I'm saying, of like what it used to be versus what we're doing today, which is all in the computer. And there are some G's out there who are using analog gear, of course, shout out to you, but a newcomer in the game, learn how to work that gear one piece at a time and incorporate that analog into your sessions, whether it's Fruity fucking Loops, Logic, or whatever. Get outside of that shit and learn how to actually turn some knobs on some real shit, buy a real keyboard instead of a MIDI controller, and understand how to work it, buy a drum machine to learn how to drum shit and do certain things, buying mastering plugins, buy mastering software, buy mastering hardware. When you do that, you just play your song next to your favorite song that you know is hot, and if it's comparable, then you know you did a good job on your mix. It doesn't need a master. Mastering is 2 or more songs.
But so what about, like, if a guy called me up and asked me to do a car commercial, do I have to send it out to get mastering?
The guy who is actually putting the commercial together, the sound engineer for that commercial, he'll already know what to do if your shit is too loud. Or he'll might call you back and say, hey, we need you to bring it down 10 dBs. It's a little too hot for us. And obviously, you know, you got to go back in and turn some of those knobs down. Again, mastering is what you put into it. If your shit sounds like Boo Boo the Fool, whether it's an audio recording, whether it's a fucking guitar track, play it next to Eric Clapton's guitar, bro. Play it next to B.B. King's guitar. Play it next to a saxophone. If you're a vocalist, listen to some real people who got vocal audio books that are on the internet and compare your vocals to theirs, because obviously those are professionals and we're trying to get a professional sound. For a low budget, if you have it, you don't have it.
Thank you so much for having me over again, man.
Always.
You're the man.
Always. You too, brother.
And we're going to do this again.
Yeah, always, man. We're going to keep your fans in tune and understanding. We're going to do a video, where we show you actually for real, how you really, connect this shit in and make it work. There's some people out there on the internet who are fucking it up for the MPC users who don't know what they're talking about. There's some weak ass producers out there doing their shit and it just don't be making me happy when I be listening and talk about how to work the MPC. That should just be weak. But me and Kyle, we're gonna really show you how to hook it up. We're gonna get you guys out of that box, out of the plug-in world, and go buy you a little synthesizer for $800, $900, and start there. Get you a workstation. You gonna have the best time of your life fucking with this shit.